Hi, I'm Bryce Crittenden.
Hi, I'm Caroline Land, and welcome back to EPL's Overdue Finds.
Hey, Caroline. How's it going today?
It's going really well. Bryce, how are you doing?
Pretty good. Pretty good, actually. Summer's almost here. Well, summer is kind of here right now, I
Yes.
would say.
Yeah.
I don't know when the first official day of summer is, but it's like,
21st, 22nd, so
yeah,
coming up in a few days.
yeah, it doesn't matter. I was able to finally put away my snow brush in my vehicle. I was quite confident that we're past that now. So summer, which means we're getting to, of course, summer reading club season, and
Yes.
which is so exciting here at the library. And last year we talked quite a bit about our adult summer reading club, and
Yeah.
so we're doing that once again this year. And part of that is for our kickoff event, we are actually hosting a screening of the 1986 classic Stand By Me at our Stanley A. Milner Library Theater. And so I thought, you know what, we're doing this big kickoff event. Let's actually talk about this movie because it's really a perfect time for the podcast. It's based on a book. And Caroline, I approached you and I was like, hey, what do you think about doing a whole episode around Stand By Me? And you were like, let's do it. But you had something to kind of admit to me about it, right?
I've never watched it. I have not read the Stephen King short story or novella that it's based on. I had never watched Stand By Me, and I was like, I'm in. Let's do this. And I think it's good. I'm really looking forward to it. I think it's great that EPL is doing this summer reads again for the adult summer reading club, because you may remember from last year, the podcast took a pretty firm stance on not letting kids have all the fun.
That's right. Absolutely.
So
And that's still we may have those commercial reads coming up here in future episodes over the summer. I might
I'm
ask
looking
you
forward
again,
to it.
like,
I'm
why
looking
should kids
forward
get
to
to
it.
have all the fun?
I've got the appropriate angry tone ready. But so you were nervous. I think a little nervous is fair to say about doing this episode when I've confessed I have no knowledge. So again, we went to staff and asked if maybe there were other people at EPL who had seen this very famous popular movie.
Absolutely, yeah. So we had a couple staff members or colleagues here at EPL kind of put their hands up, say that not only were they big fans of the movie, but also big Stephen King fans too in general. And it's awesome today, Caroline, because we have two first-time guests joining us today. So first, we want to welcome to the show. She is a digital initiatives librarian at our Stanley A. Milner branch. Amanda Derksen, welcome to Overdue Finds. How are you today?
Good. I'm really good. Thank you. I think I like gasped out loud when I saw the topic of this episode, like training montage going through my head, like lifting Stephen King books. So I'm very happy to be here.
Nice. You we're going to get into it a little bit later on, but you mentioned in the email to us about like a pandemic reading project you were working on. So I'm really curious to learn a little bit more about it. So yeah, welcome to the show. And also joining us for the very first time, she's a library services coordinator at our Castle Downs branch. Welcome to the show, Nicole Auriat. Nicole, how are you today?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me. And now, if it snows in June, we know to blame Bryce.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
I was also thinking that. But I love his optimism.
Yes. I had to laugh too because Nicole, in your email to us, you mentioned about like you'd kind of like forced some people in your lives to watch Stand By Me. So we'll talk about the movie a little bit later on, but hopefully I'd be shocked if they didn't enjoy it, but hopefully they liked it after you forced it on them. So yeah, looking forward to hearing more about that. But Caroline, before we get into our Overdue Finds picks, I just want to circle back to our last episode,
Yeah.
which of course was our best and worst TV finales. First of all, Caroline, I have to ask you, were you like me and did you think of stuff afterwards that maybe we should have
Totally.
included?
Absolutely. Both shows that we should have talked about because they're on, the all-time list of it, as well as ones that I just love to talk about. We could have done a 3-part
Yeah.
finale extravaganza for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. So before, like, it's funny because the episode came out on last couple Fridays ago, and I got an email from, or actually a direct message on Twitter from my buddy Matt. He's in a fantasy hockey league of mine. He lives in the St. Louis, Missouri area of the U.S., and he listens to the show. And it was funny because he was a little surprised that, and more so me, because I don't know if he watched it or not, Caroline, but he was a little surprised.
No, this is the podcast is very great at pointing out my gaps of pop culture knowledge. That seems to come up a lot.
Yeah, and basically he was a little surprised that I had Game of Thrones. I said that Game of Thrones ending wasn't that bad. He does not care for it at all. But he did mention to me that, and this is a show that I've never actually watched, but he said that he was a little surprised that we didn't mention Dexter in our conversation for the worst TV finales. Basically, I've heard the original series finale was terrible, but he told me that the original Dexter finale was just sad, piled on depressing with a dash of WTF. So, yeah, not a fan of the Dexter finale at all. So, has anybody here watched Dexter?
I have watched Dexter, but it's probably been like a decade plus. So I really enjoyed the first season. And then, as I often do with TV shows, I was like, I don't love where this is going, so I'm going to dip.
It's funny because I've wanted to kind of go back and actually watch it and check it out. Because, yeah, I have heard the first few seasons are quite good, but that series finale I've heard is just an absolute disaster. So I think that's kind of prevented me from going and doing that. So, so thanks, Matt, for letting me know that we maybe missed the boat on Game of Thrones. But and of course, too, as we mentioned in all of our episodes, if you have any feedback for us, send us a note at podcast@epl.ca and let us know maybe what we've missed, or if you agree with our hot takes on something. All right, so let's get into our Overdue Finds picks. A couple first-time guests today, so I'm so excited to see what they recommend to us. Nicole, I'm going to start with you. Do you have something like a movie or book or music that you've enjoyed lately that you can recommend?
I actually just did a reread of one of my favorites. So I read A Prayer for Owen Meany, which actually slides kind of right in with the Stand By Me theme, ironically, by John Irving. So it's one of my favorites. And whenever things get chaotic, sometimes I'll do a reread just kind of to visit friends again.
I've heard of that title. I've not read it. So what's the storyline of that one?
It's actually a really kind of an odd storyline, but it's about a friendship between two boys. It involves a lot of baseball and the possibility that one of them is on a grand mission from a higher power, but never quite determined. So it's told from the point of view of his friend, who's kind of watching this unique and extraordinary personality in his life. And it's much like Stand By Me, there's kind of a retrospective kind of feel to it. He's going back to his childhood from an adult perspective. And it's just a beautiful story about friendship and baseball and summers.
Nice. Oh, that sounds really good. I think, correct me if I'm wrong, they make a movie and it's called Simon Birch.
That is correct. Yeah. Also, Owen Meany talks in all caps. Yeah. He has a very distinctive way of speaking that comes through on the page.
Yeah, it's a really good use of medium to convey like a visceral sense of the book.
Totally. John Irving is an author. He's probably one of the truest examples I've found of, if you want to get to know an author, read their fiction, because the themes that he has in so many of his books, a lot of them have that kind of adult looking back aspect. And that's not to say that he is himself necessarily present in A Prayer for Owen Meany, but just the themes that he explores, the things he keeps coming back to, baseball, wrestling, all of those. You over the catalog of his work, you really get to see who he is as a person and as an author.
Absolutely. But I also find he manages to escape any sort of formula feel.
Yes.
So every book is quite unique. So if you've read one and didn't like it, I would pick up another one because he's really just got a very distinct voice in each one. And yet it's always his voice. I agree.
That's such a good point, because some of his are my absolute favorite novels, and then there are some that I would put on the total bottom of every novel I've ever read in my life. So yeah, absolutely. If you just keep going till you find your John Irving book.
Every once in a while you get to chapter 2 and you're like, oh, okay, that's where we're going. Put it down. Yeah.
Amanda, how about you? What's something you've been enjoying lately?
So I'm going straight to pop culture here. I watched the new Batman movie recently, titled creatively "The Batman," and I originally laughed when I saw that Robert Pattinson had been cast as Bruce Wayne slash the Batman, but I feel like I have to apologize to Robert Pattinson because he was just the right level of weird to like nail it. The whole movie is so sincere. Like it knows it's a comic book movie, but it's just like, welcome to the Batcave. It's full of bats. We're not going to comment on it. Like, there's bats. We know there's bats. The costuming and the camera work is really good. And yeah, I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, I did too. I've talked about this on the show before. I'm a huge Batman fan, and yeah, I like you too. Where it was kind of like when they announced Robert Pattinson was cast, I'm just like, oh no, like this isn't good. And he did such an amazing job, and it's Caroline, there's a good chance I'm talking about maybe that movie on our best of the year episode. Either that or The Northman I'm going to be talking about. But yeah, I thought the movie it definitely wasn't like your typical superhero movie. Like if you're thinking of Marvel stuff, like it's just not that at all. Like I thought it was like a good kind of combination of Zodiac and Seven. Like it's definitely more of like a psychological thriller. So yeah, if you're tired of the Marvel stuff, yeah, I agree with Amanda. It's a great movie.
It was also very dark, and by which I mean it needed some additional lighting.
Yeah, it did. Yeah, and the use of Nirvana's Something in the Way is pretty good too. They play it maybe maybe a little too often in the movie, but it's still good.
Where are you? So, Amanda, on Batman, like, are you a big fan? Cultural knowledge? Where are you kind of at with Batman?
I read a lot of Batman comics in probably like grad school era, so it's been a while. But I'm like a huge Dick Grayson fan, who, if you read the comics, is Robin. And he does a stint as Batman, and he does a stint as Nightwing, and he's great. And every time I see a live action Batman movie that is, like Dark Knight onward, I'm like, where is Dick Grayson? Where is Robin and all the Bat kids? I think that's one of the reasons I like this movie, because even though they're not in it, this is the first live action Batman since The Dark Knight where I feel like the Bat family could exist somewhere out there, and this Bruce could be their Bat dad.
Yeah, Robin doesn't get enough respect in the comic book world for sure. Mm-hmm. Caroline, how about you? What have you been enjoying?
Well, speaking of not getting enough respect, boy bands, but not music. I have a book pick this week, and it's called "If This Gets Out" by Sophie Gonzalez and Cale Dietrich. And it's a teen YA novel about a fictional boy band that has zoomed to success, and they have just finished a big American tour. There's 4 guys in the group, and they've all been slotted into pretty strict character roles. One is, the good guy, one is the heartthrob, one's the bad boy, like all of this. So these 4 guys. Ruben, one of them, is out to his bandmates, but management won't let him announce that he's gay until some ambiguous later date. They keep trying to put him off. Zach wants to be a songwriter, but they're not giving him a chance to show what he can really do. So as they finish this American tour, they're about to go to Europe. It's bigger, everything is more intense. Ruben and Zach find themselves growing closer until they realize that it's not just friendship between them, but how will the other guys in the band react? How will management? They've got all this pressure. It's a great novel. It's told from alternating perspectives. It's kind of a good combination of YA romance, but also like pop celebrity, as like you consider. On the one hand, it's like, oh, I feel so bad for these multi-millionaire people who are having this terrible time traveling across Europe. But then you think about like going to all these places and not being able to do what you want or be who you want or be who you are, and having all of this forced on you. And it's like, yeah, I wouldn't like that either. So it does a really good job of balancing out all of the perspectives of these boy band members who are kind of growing out of an age where they can be easily controlled.
Yeah, that actually, it's funny because we talked earlier about summer reading club, and that to me, just the way you're describing it sounds like a perfect summer read anyway.
Yeah, I think it's fairly, I wouldn't say a quick read, but like I said, it alternates perspectives, so that kind of keeps the pace moving really quickly, as you've got Ruben, who's much more comfortable with himself, and just wants to be who he knows who he is, and Zach, who is making these discoveries but doing it on his own, halfway across the world from his family, and with so many people and jobs riding on his continued success as a particular boy band character.
I imagine it's funny because, from our time together on this show, I know you're a fan of the genre, so I imagine once you read about that book, you're like, this is a must read for me.
Oh yeah, they had me at boy band, so I was set. What about you, Bryce? What have you been enjoying?
Yeah, so my pick, I guess, is a little similar to Amanda's this week. So this is a show I've talked about on here before, and I've actually recommended the graphic novel because it wasn't available on DVD. And I noticed in our collection that we're getting in the first 2 seasons of the Amazon Prime series, The Boys. So this is just in time. Yeah, we got a couple, Amanda and Nicole, big fans. So season 3 just started on Amazon Prime. So this is a perfect opportunity if you don't subscribe to Prime. You can now borrow the first 2 seasons and get totally caught up on the show with us. So if you're not familiar with The Boys, it's an amazing show. Basically, it's about a group of superheroes called the Seven, who are led by a very Superman-like hero called Homelander. And instead of being these picture-perfect heroes that the public sees, so kind of think of like the Avengers, they're extremely flawed. They're very dangerous. These aren't exactly kind of your Captain America and Superman and Batman characters. The show, though, focuses on a group of individuals whose main goal really is to expose the Seven and the corporation behind them while getting rid of superheroes. I won't reveal too much, but there is a lot going on in the show. But there's some awesome performances in here. The show stars Carl Urban, Jack Quaid, Anthony Starr is fantastic as Homelander, and Elizabeth Shue So I absolutely love this series. And similar to the Batman, even if you're not a fan of kind of like superhero, like Marvel stuff, this is kind of like the anti-Marvel. This is like hard rated R, kind of not your family's type of superhero show at all. But I can't recommend it enough. And Amanda and Nicole, and saw you shaking your head, so obviously you're both big fans too.
Absolutely. For me, superheroes in our culture almost take the position of like, if you think about Greek mythology, these like very powerful beings, but then they're just like us with greater powers, and they're vengeful, and some are nice, and that's what The Boys reminds me of. It's sort of this divinity of these powerful beings, but then they're just as flawed as everyone else. And how do you fight that? Do you adore them? What power do you give them? I love the show.
Yeah, it's so good. I feel like it works so well because just about everyone has that familiarity with the Marvel movies and these decades of superhero movies that we've been consuming. So we all have that visual language, and when they're using it to make a point or to make something, funny or tense, it just works so well because we all speak that same superhero like visual language. It's great.
When they were doing demolition of the Bank of Montreal building downtown, I would drive by there every day on my way to work, and the way that there was this like gutted, hollowed out building that looked like it had been in a fight between like the Hulk and somebody else, like it really had this vibe of like a city that's seen a superhero battle and now has to clean up after it. And so yeah, I got to thinking a lot about like what would it be like if that's just, an everyday thing, was like the superhero battles.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I mean that show, there's the government's involved and talking about property damage to stuff after battles and everything. So yeah, Caroline, I think you'd enjoy this one.
I think I would too. I'll have to put a hold on it after our recording today.
So today, of course, we're talking about Stand By Me and the Stephen King novella, The Body. And just like on all of these kind of retrospective episodes, Caroline, we love sharing some fun facts about the stuff that we're about to talk about, right?
Putting it in a bit of context for sure. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. So hopefully, if you're listening to this, you've seen the movie. And if not,
spoiler alert,
we will be talking about some important facts and storylines in the actual show itself. So the movie, though, in the book is about a writer named Gordy LaChance, who recalls a childhood incident when his best friend Chris Chambers and two other friends, Teddy Duchamp and Vern Tessio, journey to the body of a missing boy near the town of Castle Rock during Labor Day weekend in September 1959. The Stand By Me, the movie itself, was actually released on August 27th, 1986. And the original novella, The Body by Stephen King, was first published in 1982. And it was part of a short story collection called Different Seasons, which also features the story Rita Hayworth and the Shawshank Redemption. The movie was released to critical acclaim and was nominated for an Academy Award for Best Adapted Screenplay and 2 Golden Globes for Best Picture in the Drama category and Best Director for Rob Reiner. River Phoenix, of course, had auditioned for the part of Gordy, who ended up being played by Will Wheaton, but director Rob Reiner thought that he would make a much better Chris Chambers. I think we can all agree with that. It's funny, there's a story I read online where actor Sean Astin from like Lord of the Rings and Encino Man said he actually auditioned for the role of Chris right after River Phoenix had done his audition. When Astin walked into the room, he knew that he had no chance in getting the role because he saw the filmmakers and the casting agents were all choked up and holding back tears. So the film's success actually also resulted in renewed interest in the Ben E. King song "Stand By Me," which of course inspired the title used in the movie. King's version of the song was originally released in 1961 and was re-released at the time of this film's release. When they re-released the song, it actually ended up reaching the top 10, peaking at number 9 on the Billboard charts. And I love this story. After director Rob Reiner screened the movie for Stephen King, he noticed that King was quite emotional and wasn't speaking. He left the room and upon his return told Rob Reiner that the movie was the best adaptation of his work that he had ever seen. And Rob Reiner actually developed such a great working relationship with Stephen King after this movie, so much so that King only agreed to sell the rights to the book Misery if Rob Reiner directed the film. So, and that is another classic Stephen King adaptation right there. So, yeah, some little
Take that, Stanley Kubrick.
That's right. Yeah, that yeah, we might be talking about The Shining a little bit later on, but yeah, he famously definitely did not enjoy Stanley Kubrick's Shining. But I've also read too, Stephen King has said that this is actually his favorite adaptation of any of his books. So
He should just say it's his favorite movie. Can you imagine like what a like VIP move that would be to be like, oh yeah, my favorite movie, it's based on what I wrote.
pretty much.
This is definitely a movie that a lot of people have really watched and held on to over the years. Do you remember when you first watched it and what you thought of the movie? Amanda, I'll start with you.
Yeah, I remember thinking that Kiefer Sutherland was a snack because I watched this in undergrad. So, 18, 19, that was the first time I saw it. That was the first time I saw a lot of those like classic 80s coming of age films. So like maybe a slightly different perspective than if I'd come at it when I was 12. But I really enjoyed it. And even though I was sort of freshly out of that childhood age, it still hits really hard because I remember like enjoying the performances and thinking that they'd really nailed that sort of gross out childhood fascination with the morbid, like just totally beelined in on it. It was great.
Yeah, Kiefer Sutherland also terrifying in this.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Funny, I was watching it last night and when he's on screen, he's just like, oh my God, like he's so cool. But at the same time, like he's just, the biggest jerk in the movie. But yeah, he definitely has a very, very strong presence about him when he's on screen in this movie.
He
Yeah.
plays it very cold.
Mhm.
So you actually feel like this man has a streak of almost evil in him as opposed to just criminal or something, because he just plays it so cold.
Yeah, and I think that sets him apart from the other guys in the like that older group of guys in the gang, because they all seem kind of, I don't know, they're in on acting tough and hanging out and maybe making trouble boosting cars, but they don't kind of have that cold evilness that Kiefer Sutherland has. Yeah.
Well, he kind of plays the foil to Chris Chambers, that natural leadership. He's a strong ace. He's nasty, but he's strong. And the guys around him are sort of the Verns and the Teddies. So to me, there's sort of that foil aspect. Is this the future that Chris is facing?
Mhm.
That all that leadership and strength that just kind of turns into this nasty ruling of, a small town. Yeah, and so he definitely stands out from the pack as just not someone you would want to meet in a dark alley.
Or a lit alley.
Any alley.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Nicole, do you remember when you first watched it?
Well, in 1986, I would have turned 11 in June. and watched it when it came out in August. So I was sort of just right in the prime sort of um, demographic for this movie. I watched it with my girlfriends, and Chris Chambers was everything. He was just so fabulous. I grew into Keith Sutherland with Lost Boys, but for this one, I remember just not River Phoenix, but the character of Chris Chambers himself was just stole my heart.
Yeah, he's a great character.
And I think too, being that age, it was a wonderful window. I think there's a lot of movies about coming of age for boys and sort of that masculine trip. I think this movie really shows the complexity of boys in a way that a lot of other stories don't. The fact that the nurturing in their friendship, that as you become a man, you do that by learning it's okay to cry and it's okay to reach out to your friends and support them. And so I think that was actually a great kind of window when you're 11 and sitting around with your girlfriends to have that image of emotional complexity presented to you.
Yeah, that scene after the junkyard when they're comforting their friend is just really, it's very affecting. It's very
Mhm.
sweet.
Yeah. Yeah.
And has, I think, my favorite line of the whole movie, which is when Teddy, I'm blanking on the character.
Corey
Is it?
Feldman's character?
Yeah, Corey
Yeah,
Feldman's
steady.
character. When Teddy he's crying and they're comforting him and he says, "I'm sorry for ruining everyone's good time."
Mhm.
And says it like there's maybe like 3% joking in it, but 97% serious of like, I'm sorry for ruining everyone's good time. And it was just this moment that I totally identified with of being overcome with emotion or something and not able to stop it, needing to do it, but also being like, oh, this is ruining the moment. And it was just I paused the movie and rewatched it because I could not believe what a genius line that was.
I think you're right. We've all had that moment at some point or another
Yeah.
where you're just that overwhelm comes at a moment you think is not appropriate, and
Yeah.
everybody around you is just trying to take care of you. And you're like, I'm sorry.
Yeah. Yeah. So Bryce, were you watching this when it first came out?
I don't remember exactly when, but I'm pretty sure I saw it, I think just after it came out, like on VHS, like home video at the time, because I remember my parents had rented it and woke up early, saw that they had rented it, and threw it in the old VCR and watched it with my probably a bowl of Captain Crunch in the morning. But yeah, I remember really liking it, and I think I was a little too young to, I think, really appreciate it the first time I watched it, because I would have been probably about I want to say maybe like 8 or 9, I think, around that time. But I do remember really enjoying it, kind of the story with the boys and everything. And like, it's funny because like the one thing that really stood out to me the most when watching it for the first time was the pie eating scene, the infamous pie eating scene, and just like how like sick to my stomach it made me feel. Like I don't think I'd ever seen something like that in a movie before. So that part really stood out to me. Yeah, I just really enjoyed it. But Caroline, I think
Yeah.
we're all eager to know, because you just watched this movie for the very first time the other
Yeah.
day, I assume.
Yesterday.
Yesterday.
Yes.
Okay, there we go. Yesterday.
Yeah.
So overall, like, what did you think of it?
It was great. I liked it.
Mhm.
I don't know what I thought. I mean, I've had a pretty good sense of going into it. I've seen it um referenced and even parodied. There's a Family Guy segment of it that takes a lot of some of the more famous elements of it and adapts it through a twisted Family Guy lens. So, I mean, definitely things that I was aware of, but I think I was surprised by the young actors. They just seem so genuine on screen. And I think, all of them went on to do other work in other areas that show that these are strong actors, but just their personalities as people, I think, too, playing on screen, going between aged and world experienced, and then young boys the next moment, and being on that cusp. There were some lines too. Sometimes they would be saying bad words I'm not going to say on the podcast, um, for like the thrill of saying them. And you could almost see like the glee on their face at what they were saying. But then there would be these like totally emotional moments where they'd get upset and like they'd say something, and it would be like genuine feeling behind it, or more owning of maybe the language and what they were doing. It wasn't for show, it wasn't trying it on. And so that balance between young boy and older, more experienced, was something I wasn't expecting all of the characters to go through. I thought maybe, River Phoenix might be older, and Jerry O'Connell might be younger, but they all had their moments of playing in both spaces.
Yeah, like rewatching this movie again, like before we started, I was talking to Amanda about it, and like I just watched this movie like a couple of months ago, and rewatched it again last night. And yeah, it's just, the movie definitely hits you harder as you get older than it does like when I watched it when I was like 8 or 9 years old. And like just the lines about like really almost kind of like losing your friends as you get to that certain age. And 12 is so weird like that, where you're kind of like leaving elementary school and going into junior high, and you're going to get a whole new group of friends and everything. And it just, yeah, the movie definitely hits you a little bit harder when you watch this and you're older.
Absolutely. One thing I noticed rewatching it is how much to the idea of deviation from an expected path. Like they all have their futures laid out in front of them, but as they're walking, they like take this turn to do a shortcut. And every kind of change from the expected path requires a sacrifice or is hard work. The train, one of my favorite scenes, which is the leech scene. Every time I watch that movie, I love the fact that it's one of the most horrific scenes of the movie, judging by the characters' faces. Um, but every kind of deviation they make from what's expected of them kind of takes this sacrifice from them, and it kind of shows as they move into the future, their roles are laid out, and are you willing to sacrifice to deviate, which is really kind of the question for Chris. And as I'm watching that, I actually picked up on a little bit of Stephen King twist. I'm not sure. Is it okay to do spoilers?
Oh yeah, we did the alert.
Okay, absolutely. Just because like Shawshank Redemption and this one just seem like outside of Stephen King's normal voice. But it's all about deviating from the expected fate, like these boys, like what route do you take? Can you forge your own path? But in the end, when Ace is holding a knife to Chris, and he's like, and we'll get you, not today, but we'll get you. And the whole story is about the fact that Chris was stabbed to death as an adult. And I'm like, it did come around. Like, was his fate just kind of delayed or something? So it just kind of puts that little bit of Stephen King spooky on it. So I kind of enjoyed kind of getting more from it the second time watching it again. Well, probably about fifth time.
It's funny because, yeah, you don't really pick up on it the first time you watch it. But, yeah, the more times you watch, you'll notice, yeah, these little things. And, of course, yeah, like they say at the end of the movie, Chris was stabbed trying to break up a fight, basically, and just has this very, very tragic ending anyway. And, of course, the movie has such an all-star cast. So we've got River Phoenix, Kiefer Sutherland, Will Wheaton, Corey Feldman, John Cusack. So I think I know what the answer is going to be to this one, but does everyone have a favorite character? And was there maybe one performance that really stood out to you? Amanda?
So even though Kiefer Sutherland is a snack and River Phoenix is going around being River Phoenix, my favorite performance in this movie is actually Jerry O'Connell as Vern. Because that kid's comedic timing was just so good. Like he always waits just the right amount of time, like the moment before he starts singing when they're walking away from the junkyard, and that pause, or like screaming down the railway, like he did an amazing job. I loved it.
Yeah, it always cracks me up with the comb. He's like, they're talking about like, oh great, nobody brought food, and he's just like, how could everybody forget food? Like it's like, sorry, I didn't remember it. But I remembered to bring the comb, and they're like, you don't have any hair.
And then he says, I brought it for you guys.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like it's so funny. It's his performance was just so good.
Yeah.
Well, I think his character could have gone the most cliche and flat, but he instead brought it to that truly awkward social person we've all known who's just all good intentions, and and I think he played it in a way that kind of circumvented the cliche of the character.
Yeah.
It's that sincerity again. I'm a sucker for sincerity.
Yeah, I think Nicole, I think that's exactly what I was stumbling to say with like my balance stuff before, was that tuning in for the first time, I think I expected to see cliches. You know, the tough guy, the Will Wheaton as like the soulful kid with an eye for detail, the fat kid that everybody picks on. I was expecting to see these cliches, these stock characters, and none of them were that.
Yeah, they fit those roles. Like it is kind of the tough guy and the sensitive artist. And that's what I was saying about giving them a complexity that you don't often see in characters that age or that type of story, where the tough kid cries and the sensitive kid, pulls a weapon, and the awkward kid just really, really wants everyone to be happy and have nice hair.
Yeah.
Yes.
They might be on TV or getting the newspaper. The other part with him that really cracks me up too is when after they eat and they're all sitting by the campfire and they got the cigarettes out, and he's like, "Oh, there's nothing like a good cigarette after a meal." It's just so awkward and funny to me.
And the scene that kind of puts everything in motion for it too, him under the porch digging for his pennies, like that he's been working on this for almost a year. It's such a funny visual shot of him with all of these holes.
Yeah.
And it's like you kind of get the character in that moment. We've just met him. We don't really know him yet, but we know this character because he's been looking for his penny jar for almost a year under the porch.
Nicole, how about you?
Well, at the time, of course, it was Chris Chambers because I was that age. I do think Kiefer Sutherland does an absolute excellent job of not overplaying the role and is scarier for that. And I also want to give props to Corey Feldman as Teddy. He really does do a good portrayal of a child who's not bad, just really damaged. And then it leads him on to, as we see when they do the ending and kind of let you see their paths, that maybe it led him to a bad road. But when you're watching the movie, you see the injury in him, and you still like the kid. And I think that's actually just such a wonderful reminder, especially for all of us who work with youth and everything, that sometimes when you're dealing with someone who might seem difficult or different, that sometimes there's an injury that you're not seeing. So, and I think he did play it, like Carolyn said earlier, so many of the roles were played just wonderfully. So it's hard to pick that favorite. My favorite thing is to watch it with someone who's like, oh, that looks like John Cusack. It is. Oh, that looks like Kiefer Sutherland. It
is. Yeah, the role of Teddy is, and Corey Feldman, you're right, does an outstanding job, and you see that pain where he reveres his father's, you know, he's like, my father stormed the beaches of Normandy. Like he to him, like his dad is a hero and should be treated as such. But like his dad did this horrible thing to him and, you know, held his head down and his ear to a hot stove and scarred him and everything. And I think in the book, it's actually, if I recall, it's actually worse. And I think he does it on both ears maybe, but yeah. And just, you know, you see that pain in him. And now too, you know, as we, you know, the movie's been out for over 35, it's been out for over 35 years, I believe. And, you know, we know also a lot more about Corey Feldman as a person and, you know, some of the stuff that he unfortunately had to go through as a child actor and everything. And yeah, I think that just kind of makes his performance even more powerful, knowing the horrible stuff he would have been going through during probably the filming of this movie.
I think the point about the impact of Teddy's father on him, all of the parents, all of the adults in this movie are almost kind of like ghosts in a sense. Very little presence physically in the movie, in a way that makes sense, you know, especially for the boys. They're on this journey, they're leaving. They didn't really have to go out of their way to create this adult absent environment setup, but the parents have had such impacts on their kids and the lives that they have, but then also characters that we don't see, like the school teacher from Chris's story of the milk money, and being let down by her, and that impact on it, the way that you know, the adults are the villains in the pie eating contest story of treating poor Davy so terribly. It's not just other children being cruel, it's adults who are, you know, destroying this person, and they're all kind of like swirling around unseen in this movie because they're never quite separated from the impact that the parents and adults have had on these kids.
When I was watching it, I actually had almost the exact words you use, going, wow, they just seem to be okay with being cruel to children. Like, and then you see it again with, you notice how much the brother kind of aspect figures into the movie. Like Chris's brother is part of the gang, and then of course there's Gordy's brother, who is this idealized sort of expectation of achievement, and just about the modeling these boys have is either negative or absent. And so all they kind of have is each other. Kind of really focuses the movie just on that sort of emotional support within the four of them.
Yeah, the families are not safe places to go back to.
No. Yeah, because Chris too talks about, like, at the beginning when they're going to go out on their adventure, and he's talking about how, like, he's like, yeah, my dad'll, like, basically my dad's going to beat me, but I don't care. They're like, this is worth it. So yeah. And poor Gordy.
I think that that's one of the reasons I was slower to want to watch this. I just didn't relate to the premise of wanting to see a dead body. And I think that like, it took a while for me to kind of see past that, in this sense of, like, you know, oh, we're going to go look for this, and we're going to, and I've never been the kid that would appeal to. I'm like, no, you guys have fun. I'm going to stay here with my comic book. So.
Yeah.
I totally would have been in. I would have been like, let's go.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I would have been same thing at that age too. If my friends had told me that, we would absolutely be on our bikes going down to try and see this body, unfortunately.
Mm-hmm.
And then been horrified if we actually did.
Oh, absolutely.
Oh,
totally
yeah.
scarred for
Yeah.
life. Yeah.
No, it's all about the journey.
Yes.
Yeah, and that's a really a good scene too with where Gordy sees the deer and he has that moment just for himself that he doesn't share with the rest of the group. Um yeah, on his own kind of personal journey.
Hmm.
Yeah,
And even
Bryce, did you have a favorite character?
You know what? I think a lot of people, obviously and rightfully so, talk about River Phoenix as Chris Chambers, and he does an amazing job. But really, I don't think Will Wheaton gets enough respect for this movie as playing Gordy, and like we talked about, like the adults in this movie, and just the way Gordy is like treated around his parents and everything. And even too, like we see in that flashback sequence where he's sitting at the table with his brother Denny, and Denny's like totally, like you said, Nicole, he's like this like perfect all-American kid. Like he's superstar at football, and he's dating the homecoming queen or whatever. And Gordy's sitting there at the table and he just wants the potatoes to be passed to him, and his dad could not care less. His mother isn't listening to him, and you really feel sorry for him. And also too, like Will Wheaton is another very similar to Corey Feldman, where we've heard a little bit about his life growing up too in Hollywood, and he was also somebody else who kind of was going through kind of a tough time as well. And there's a lot of memes too about Will Wheaton as Wesley Crusher on Star Trek The Next Generation. And yeah, I just think that it's definitely wasn't an easy role to play, kind of being kind of, I know kind of Chris is kind of the leader, but really it's obviously it's Gordy's story. And I just think Will Wheaton does an absolutely amazing job. And especially too, at the end where he's kind of breaking down and talking to Chris and about his dad doesn't love him and doesn't know he exists and everything. And it's just very heartbreaking. And I think he does an incredible job in this movie.
One thing that just occurred to me as you were saying that, we're comparing sort of like the child actor to their characters. And if you look at like the way the actors' lives turned out, who would have guessed that everyone would want to be Vern?
Yeah. Pretty much. Yeah.
Like Jerry O'Connell's path seems, you're like, wow, okay, so Vern was the one.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny because in that Family Guy spoof that Caroline was talking about for Stand By Me, at the end they actually have Richard Dreyfuss doing the voiceover, and then they're talking about Jerry O'Connell at the end. It's like, did you know that he grew up to marry Rebecca Romaine?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was interesting. Jerry O'Connell is now, I believe, one of the hosts on talk show The Talk, and Will Wheaton was on sometime over this last year, and they were talking kind of about Stand By Me and their paths and all of this. But Jerry O'Connell reached out to Will Wheaton and said, I want to say that I'm sorry, I didn't know you were going through all the things you were going through at the time, and I wish I had done more to help you. I wish I had been there for you at that time. And Will Wheaton's response was like, thank you, I appreciate that. We were children. You were a child at the time. Like, be generous with yourself in not knowing and recognizing what I was going through. And looking at it now, like, they were children. They are so young in this. And they have those moments of, you can see the men they would become or would become if they hadn't died or gone through such tragedies. But they're so young in this. And just thinking of what some of the actors were going through for sure.
So Jerry O'Connell is your favorite performance, Caroline?
I had to think about this because I think Vern is my favorite character, but I was kind of split between River Phoenix and Will Wheaton for my favorite performance. I was just a smidgen too young for River Phoenix at the time, and so I was never really aware of his heartthrob days. Only in retrospect after he died. So I kind of came up at the wrong age for River Phoenix. And so as an adult, rewatching a lot of these things have been kind of discovering that era of it, which is then kind of like odd to be like, oh, I understand why this person's a heartthrob, a teen heartthrob, says the woman in her late 30s. But it, seeing it and kind of being like, oh, this is why when a TV show like Saved by the Bell needed to have a like popular actor insert into a line, they would say like River Phoenix. This is why everyone was really excited about him. So as you mentioned, it's based on the Stephen King novella The Body. I have not read that. Has anyone here read The Body, and what are your thoughts?
I have. It was a while ago. Because it's more detailed, it is a bit more gritty, I would say. Where in the movie, there's very much because they frame it through the nostalgia of the man thinking back. It allows it to be a little bit cheesy or like more colorful. Where in the novella, there's definitely more description of the hardship the children were going through. So it's darker.
Yeah, we get also too, like in the novella, we get a little bit of it's not a great explanation, but we do also learn a little bit more about like Gordy's parents as well. And like how kind of like they were older when they had Gordy, and it kind of doesn't really kind of give the parents a pass on why they treat him horribly, but we do learn a little bit more about his family though.
Mm-hmm.
Amanda, what were your thoughts? I know you've definitely read it.
I've definitely read it recently as well, which is helpful for comparing the two. It is a pretty faithful adaptation. I quite like the changes that were made for the film. One of the things that I really appreciated about the novella is, and you don't get this in the movie, is the bit about Ray Bauer, the kid who dies by the train tracks. You get a little bit more about, his story, what he was doing out there, and the way that the boys, or Gordy as the Pav character, is like putting himself in Ray's shoes, and what it would be like to be the dead kid. And there's a really great sort of a monologue that Gordy has inside his head that starts with, I think it's "the kid was dead," and then it just goes on and on and on. The kid is the negative end of a dead battery. Like the kid is dead, and it's so final, and you can feel the Gordy just internalizing that and like truly understanding what death means after his experience with his older brother dying, and then like being confronted with it like that, totally unsanitized, no parental intervention or funerals or anything like that. And it's a really strong part of the novella for me that I think makes it worth reading in addition to watching Stand By Me.
Yeah, like you said, it is that's the one thing I noticed when I read it just recently as well, was that it's a very faithful adaptation. Like, and it's, and especially too as fans of, if you're listening to this and you're a fan of the movie, which I assume you are, especially if you're listening to this episode, definitely go and read it. Like, it's only like 150 pages or something like that. And yeah, you definitely you learn more about the characters, and, there's some stuff added on. Yeah, and then the one part too that I thought was really weird in the novella is there's a part where, because of course it's told by Gordy, we have a short story by, as he calls him, Gordon LaChance from college, and it's called Stud City, and it's kind of like right smack in the middle of it, and that was probably my least favorite part about the novella. Like, it just felt very out of place, and it's pretty graphic actually. When it describes some certain acts and everything, but yeah, it's still worth reading. You can probably skip over the Stud City part though.
I definitely put the book down briefly when I got to the Stud City. I was like, what? Is there an error in my ebook copy? I did not understand what was going on.
Yeah.
Well, Stephen King's a great storyteller, but as a writer, he's very dependent on an editor.
Mm-hmm.
So there's almost always some part of it where you're like,
Yeah. Stephen King uncut and unedited is a no.
So speaking of Stephen King, obviously we talked about, we're looking for guests who are fans of the show, and you both mentioned that you're huge fans of his writing, and I am as well. And Amanda, I'm going to start with you because you actually let us know about a really interesting pandemic reading project that you're doing. Can you share with listeners a little bit about this?
Oh, yeah. So my project started as a joke, and then as many things in my life that start out as jokes quickly progressed to being extremely serious and not a joke at all. So in 2019, I read my very first Stephen King book, which was 11/22/63, and I really liked it. And I was like, great, probably I'll read some Stephen King again. And then February 2020, I was in an airport and I bought two things. I bought The Institute, which was his newest book at the time, and I bought a bottle of hand sanitizer because there were all these news stories about some sort of illness that was coming through, and I wasn't quite sure what that was about, but I thought hand sanitizer might be a good defense. I don't know that I actually ended up using it, but that wasn't like the big before and after for me, but it was definitely one of them. And then alone in my tiny apartment in the middle of this pandemic, I thought maybe I should just spend the entire summer reading Stephen King books on my balcony. And once I made a spreadsheet, it was all over. And I am, I think, 51 books in since March 2020. I'm
So
almost done.
I need to ask, are you going chronologically, alphabetically? Do you have an order? Is that what the spreadsheet is for? I'd like some more details on that.
Yes. So I started with the good ones, the recommended ones, and that went great. And I flew through them. And then there was a very dark period in the middle where I got to some of the ones that, I mean, the man has written 60 plus novels. There are some not great novels in that batch, and I have absolutely read them. And there were a few that I had to really, really push to get through. So the spreadsheet is the adrenaline of hitting the tick box and like getting those good emotions really gets me through. But there are also some gems that I think are kind of like hidden good ones that don't get talked about very much that I really appreciated getting to. And now at the very end, I'm trying to go chronologically because I feel like I've learned from my mistake. But I've only got 11 novels left, and I'm determined to get through them this year. Like, this is it. I'm going to finish.
Have you been reading exclusively Stephen King, or do you break it up with some other stuff?
I try to do like Stephen King, something else, Stephen King. So it's about every other one or every third. Probably a third of my reading since 2020 has been Stephen King.
Wow.
Yeah.
So it's funny because you said you still have like 11 more books to go. And by the time you get through those 11, based on how fast he churns out books, you will probably have almost another 15 to 20 books added to your list.
I've had to add 3 to the spreadsheet just since I've started. And at dinner the other day, my friend broke the news. She was like, did you know that Stephen King is publishing another novel? And I was like, oh yeah, like Gwendy's, like there's a third Gwendy novel. I'm on top of it. I know about it. She was like, no. It's called Fairy Tales, and it doesn't have a publication date yet. I was like, excuse me? Like, how dare he? Like, I'm excited to read it because I've quite liked his recent stuff, but it's going to be rough to add that to the spreadsheet, I think.
So do you have a favorite title of his, though?
Oh, it's tough. I have quite enjoyed a lot of his fiction, which is good because otherwise I think that's pretty masochistic of me to keep going. I really did enjoy, I really liked The Dead Zone. And Stephen King is I thought it was a little psychic of him. Like he anticipated some of that politician as shock celebrity a little bit. And it was a really interesting read to be going through in this current era of modern politics. I also both really enjoyed and really disliked. The parts that were really good were so good, and the parts that were bad, I'm sitting there going, oh, Stephen, why?
Yeah.
Why is this in here?
I think I know which part you're talking about. And yeah, same thing. I remember because I read it pre-pandemic, and I was on the bus and I was like reading it for like months every day on my commute, and it came to that part and I'm on the bus and I'm just like, nah, I'm closing this. I don't want somebody peering over my shoulder and seeing I'm reading this here. So yeah.
Sometimes it's just a little too much. I also really liked Needful Things, which is an example of a thing that he does where he takes a town and he gives it its own personal comprehensive apocalypse, and he does like multiple pubs, so you get to see what feels like the whole town and their utter destruction. And I always really enjoy when Stephen King does that specific thing.
In your email, you mentioned your argument that Needful Things is basically Stephen King's take on Middlemarch. Would you like to elaborate on that? Because I would like you to elaborate on that.
So Middlemarch is also, a slice of life. You get to know an entire community and you get really invested in the minutiae of their lives. And it's not for everybody because you get really invested in the minutiae of their lives. And Stephen King loves doing that same thing. And he's great at building a character up in just a few sentences. You get this really clear picture of someone. And he loves that really intense, like 20 different pubs where you jump back and forth and get a sense of the entire community. And that was something that I thought Middlemarch did really well as well. But it's you have to find people who have read Middlemarch and also a lot of Stephen King in order to really like dig into it.
Well, maybe those people are listening to the podcast today.
Nicole, how about you? Did you have what are some of your favorite Stephen King novels?
I'm going to go with the classic, The Shining, just because it really is a twist on the classic haunted house, if you think about it. As well, the interesting thing about that is I don't like any of the movies based on it.
Really?
Just like Stephen King.
Yeah.
It really, but I think that's sort of the nature of the book. It's so much is happening within the characters' minds that to then try to portray it on the screen would lose some of the story just because of how it's written. He also jumps back to something we had mentioned earlier, like the prayer for Owen Meany. He really uses the printed word to convey a mood in that story. I think I was about 11 or 12 when I read it, and I was reading it at 2 in the morning where it's dark and everyone else is asleep. And he actually does something where there's this stream of consciousness in the book, and it's the boy thinking to himself, and it's just all lower cap stream of consciousness. And all of a sudden, the spirits or demons or however you want to classify them jump into his head, and it's all caps and it's get out of his head. And I jumped in bed. Like it was the best jump scare ever just from the printed word. And I think that's when I fell in love with Stephen King. And I have to say, I think sometimes he doesn't get enough acknowledgement for his short stories. Like today we've been talking about his novellas, and obviously they produce great things, but even like his short stories are they're tight stories more so than his novels. And if you have a book of his short stories in the summer, it's so wonderful because then you're not committed.
Yeah, Apt Pupil is really good too. It's also one of my favorite novellas of his, which is, of course, is also part of different seasons.
Stephen King said, though, that all his novels actually occur in the same universe.
Yes.
Just different places. Yeah.
Yeah, because we do have, like, obviously there's, in a lot of his books, we have references to people being locked up in Shawshank, or kind of town of Castle Rock obviously comes up quite a bit as well. So I have not nearly read nearly as much of his work as Amanda has, but yeah, I think Amanda, you've probably seen quite a few of those connections throughout his writing.
Yeah, reading this many Stephen Kings in this short a time span, it starts to feel like I'm just reading one enormous multiverse novel to some extent. I was reading from a Buick 8 the other day, and I was like, I have seen this car before. I don't know which novel it was in, but I have seen it. So I was racking my brain trying to figure out which one it was in, and I'm pretty sure it's a Dark Tower novel. But connections everywhere. He
Yeah.
reuses and reuses and reuses.
My all-time favorite Stephen King book, though, and Amanda, it's the book that apparently got you hooked on his writing, is 11/22/63. It's actually probably my all-time favorite book, and that's when I picked up when we were on holidays one year and just absolutely devoured it. Just the story of this guy, Jake Epping, being able to go back in time and just his obsession with stopping the assassination of John F. Kennedy. It's such a great thriller, and it is scary at times too. And as he gets kind of a little bit closer and he starts, really following Lee Harvey Oswald, and just this notion of like fate and how you can't mess with it, and just some things are just meant to be. And it also has this absolutely, the ending is incredible on it too. And we do, I believe in our collection, we do have like the mini series, which actually I enjoyed quite a bit. But 11/22/63 is my favorite. Caroline, have you read any Stephen King?
I have read Bag of Bones.
Oh, nice.
That is, I'm pretty sure, my one and only Stephen King. I may be the only person in the entire world who has read that one and only Stephen King title. I'm pretty sure I just, bought the paperback when it came out, and it was probably summer looking for a read, and read Bag of Bones.
That is a very random Stephen King title.
That is one of the 11 I have not read yet.
Well, I look forward to hearing your thoughts on it.
All right. So we're running out of time today. So let's get into our quick roundtable questions. Think back to when you were 12, just like the characters in Stand By Me. What were some of the things that you'd like to do with your friends during the summer? Nicole?
Pretty much just a lot of running around the neighborhood. Girls when they're 12, there's a lot of starting to sit around and giggle and talking about boys. With my cousins, there were some acreages, so there was some frog hunting and jumping off things we probably shouldn't have jumped off of. So pretty typical, I think.
Nice. Amanda?
I was a farm kid, and I think most of my friends at 12 were farm kids too. So we had to really enroll our parents in order to get together in the summer. So sleepovers were the big thing, because then you could have this big chunk of uninterrupted time. And then, of course, at the sleepovers when I was 12, I think the Ouija board phase swept through yet again. It's a cyclical thing. Then I was definitely, I hope nobody I knew when I was 12 is listening to this, but when I was 12, I was definitely the kid who was leaning a little heavy on the Ouija board. What's it called? Planchettes. Just because it felt like, isn't it better if the Ouija board understands your question and gives you an interesting answer? So I guess I liked playing the part of the ghost in the Ouija board with my friends when I was 12.
It really comes up. Sometimes you see, sorry, I'm digressing in the quick roundtable questions, which is usually not allowed, but now and then the movie, sometimes I saw online being referenced as, a story of a group of girls coming of age and having similar things with a backwards looking narrator, and it's a different movie, but it kind of nails that element of like the sleepover and being like 11, 12, 13 and discovering like that paranormal occult vibe that I think was true to the characters in the movie and definitely true to my experience as well.
Mm-hmm.
Caroline, how about you?
I was I was a pretty solitary introvert. The idea of spending this much time with a group of people stressed me out, even just watching the movie. I'd be swimming, I'd be reading, I'd be just kind of hanging out on my own. Bryce,
Nice.
dead body
Yeah, well,
hunting.
yeah, if you had told 12-year-old Bryce there was a body somewhere in Medicine Hat, you know I was getting on my bike to go find it. But no body hunting for me. But yeah, lots of bike rides though at that time. And I also remember too, kind of that summer, my friends and I, we made a plan to go see Terminator 2 in the theater. We were too young, but we convinced the lady working at the Monarch Theater in Medicine Hat that we were 14. Spoiler alert, I looked probably like I was 9 or 10 at the time. But we got in to see Terminator 2. It was like my first R-rated movie in the theater. It was awesome.
Did your plan involve two of you in a trench coat?
Not quite. It should have, but
that was the next. If the just straight out lie didn't work, then you would have done like someone on someone's shoulders with a trench coat.
Definitely, yeah. All right, so Summer Reads, our summer reading club for adults and teens, starts on Saturday, June 25th. What's one book that you plan on reading this summer, Nicole?
Actually, I just put one on hold. Ordinary Monsters by I think J.R. Miro. It's historical fantasy, and it's got maybe just because I did kind of do the first 3 episodes of season 3 of The Boys. So this is about children who have some powers, and it just looks like a dark sort of superhero Victorian mashup.
Amanda, is there what's Stephen King book, or is there another book you're probably more looking forward to reading?
Well, aside from the 11 remaining Stephen King novels that I am determined to get through this summer, I'm also really looking forward to reading a book I've got on hold right now. It's There Are No Accidents by Jesse Singer, and it's a nonfiction look at the way that accidents are often blamed on sort of the last person in the pool, and you punish the last person in the pool, but then you don't look at the chain of events that leads to it. So the example that I read that this author uses is person in a bike lane is hit and killed by a vehicle. Person in the vehicle takes the blame and is punished for this, but that's not the only accident that happens in that bike lane, because there are all these other things that you can do systemically in order to help prevent the very normal human tendency to have accidents or to make impulsive decisions. So it looks really interesting. I listened to a podcast with the author and it sounded great, so I'm excited to check it out.
Caroline, what are you reading?
I have 2 because I couldn't narrow it down. The first is Carrie Soto is Back. New book by Taylor Jenkins Reid, a podcast favorite of mine. Really looking forward to that book. And then also my hold just came in on Hearts on Fire, 6 years that changed Canadian music, 2000 to 2005 by Michael Barclay. So it's very much my jam, my era. Really looking forward to going in deep, and it looks deep. It looks like a long book with tiny print, so I am jazzed.
Well, that Nothing But a Good Time book that I recommended on the last episode, that thing's like 600 pages as well. So
you should have mentioned that. But you would have gotten even like more props for reading a massive book.
That's right. For me this summer, it's funny, I just finished watching the HBO series called Winning Time, which looks at the 80s LA Lakers, like that dynasty forming. So it is actually based on a book called Showtime, Magic, Kareem, Riley, and the Los Angeles Lakers dynasty of the 1980s. They got a little loose with the facts in the TV show, but it was entertaining. But I do want to go and actually read the book by Jeff Pearlman, and basketball fans absolutely love this book. So I'm curious to get the actual facts behind that Lakers dynasty.
We'll have to do maybe basketball episode,
Maybe.
an 80s sports episode. I don't know. We'll put it to good use somehow.
Definitely.
Thank you both so much for joining us today, Nicole and Amanda. This has been a fantastic conversation, and I'm so glad to have finally watched this movie and then been talking about it with everyone today. Is there anything coming up that you would like listeners to know about what's happening at Castle Downs, Nicole?
Absolutely. One of the best things about our branch is we overlook the beautiful Lake Beaumaris. And they just finished renovating the lake when COVID ended. So starting June 23rd, Thursdays at 10:30, we're going to be doing story time under the sky. Yeah, so there's a green space right behind the library by the lake there, and we're going to do an outside story time.
What has the goose situation been like?
Usual. There's a lot, and they get cranky, and you just tell them that they need to move out of the way, and they tend to listen. They just need some talk back.
This is the other day I had to test our doors before we opened, and I went out and I saw in the Capilano parking lot there were 2 Canada geese walking by, and I said out loud to myself, "What is this, Castle Downs?" Which was very funny to me, but I was also aware no one was around to hear it. But now everyone has, so yeah.
Well, thank you for thinking of us.
Yeah. That sounds really great. So check out details of all of Castle Downs programming. We'll have a link to that in our item list. And Amanda, is there anything you'd like listeners to know about?
Well, I would say if you haven't seen The Wall at the Stanley Milner branch downtown, you absolutely should. And I will also say that during the summer, we will be doing quite a bit of testing of our brand new upcoming space application. So if you are interested in a sneak peek, you can keep an eye on the public schedule where we will sometimes pop that up and you can get a preview of the beautiful, beautiful space application that's under development.
And Bryce, what would you like listeners to know about?
Yes, I've got a plug on this episode. So we talked about it at the top of the show, and you can actually join us at the Mud Art Theater in the Stanley A. Milner Library for a screening of Stand By Me on Friday, June 24th, as we kick off our Adult Summer Reading Club, which runs until August 27th. And here's the cool thing about it, Caroline, is we're actually going to be giving away a copy of Different Seasons, which includes the novella of the body. So you can go see a movie for free on the big screen, Stand By Me, and you get a chance to win a copy of Different Seasons. And there's going to be some refreshments there as well. So stop by and say hi and join us for that screening on the 24th. You can also learn more about our summer reading club by going to epl.ca/summer-reads.
We hope you've enjoyed today's episode. If you haven't, we encourage you to subscribe so that you automatically get all of our new episodes. You can also leave us a review on Apple Podcasts, and most importantly, tell a friend about the show.
And of course, as Caroline mentioned, we'll have a link to everything that we talked about in today's show notes. And as I mentioned also earlier, we love to hear from our listeners. So you can reach us on Twitter at epl.ca and use the hashtag EPL Overdue Finds. And you could also email us at podcasts@epl.ca to share your Stand By Me, maybe some of your favorite scenes from the movie, and maybe some Stephen King picks with us. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you next time.